Boost Your English.
From English Podcast with John.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to English Podcast with John. Thanks for joining us today. In this episode, we're talking about professional English at work and how to handle difficult colleagues. We'll guide you step by step with clear, real-life workplace examples you can use right away. And I'm so glad we're getting into this topic today. I feel like this is something literally everyone has to deal with at some point, right? Just a universal part of working life. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. And I totally agree that this is such a fantastic topic because it's real, it's challenging, and it's something where the right words can make all the difference.
That's so true. It really can. And before we jump in, just a quick reminder to everyone listening, if you find this kind of chat helpful, please do take a second to like, subscribe, and maybe share it with a friend or colleague. It really helps us out. Thank you so much to everyone tuning in.
Ready to get into it?
Let's do it. So let's set the stage. We've all been there, right? You're in a situation with a colleague, and it's just difficult.
Yeah.
And in your own language, you probably have, a dozen ways to handle it, a little joke, a certain tone of voice. But in English, that can feel like a huge challenge.
It really can. You feel like your only options are to be silent or to come across way too strong because you don't have all those little in-between tools.
Exactly. That's the perfect way to put it. You're trying to find that balance between being direct enough to solve the problem, but also, polite enough to keep things professional. It's a real tightrope walk.
It is. And if you lean too far into directness, especially across different cultures, you can accidentally sound really aggressive or even rude, and suddenly a small problem becomes a huge one.
I have a perfect story about this. I remember early in my career, I got an email from a manager in New York, and he wrote something like, "The current projections are suboptimal."
Oof. Suboptimal.
Yeah.
That's a very specific kind of corporate language.
Right. And I read that and my heart just sank. I immediately thought he was calling me incompetent. It felt like this huge personal criticism.
Of course, it sounds so cold and final.
Totally. It wasn't until I talked to a coworker who kind of laughed and explained that, no, that's just very standard formal business English. He wasn't mad at me. He was just stating an objective problem with the numbers.
That's such a great example.
Yeah.
Because that formality you first read as coldness is actually, it's a tool. It's an emotional buffer.
Yeah, but buffer, I like that.
Yeah, by using that kind of structured professional language, you're taking the personal feelings out of it. You're forcing the conversation to be about the task, about the data, not about who's upset or who's right.
It's like you're putting on a professional shield. It stops you from reacting emotionally and helps you start thinking strategically.
Exactly. So, with that in mind, what do you think is the biggest mistake people make when they have to switch from, say, casual water cooler chat to a really difficult professional conversation in English?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the biggest mistake is not switching their language style, their register, clearly enough.
How do you mean?
Well, if you're used to joking around with someone and then you have a serious issue with them, trying to address it using that same casual, friendly language it just backfires.
Right. It either sounds passive-aggressive or it doesn't sound serious at all.
Exactly. The other person can just brush it off like it's not a big deal. You lose all the gravity of the situation. You need to signal that the conversation has changed.
That's a really sharp insight. The language itself is the signal. You're drawing a line in the sand, linguistically.
Yeah, the language becomes the guardrail for the conversation, keeping everything on track.
Okay.
Okay, so let's get into our first common type of difficult colleague.
I think a really common one is the negative colleague. The one who's always complaining or maybe spreading a bit of office gossip.
Ugh, yes. The energy vampires. They just drain you.
They really do. And you feel trapped because you want to be a supportive coworker, but you also know the conversation is going nowhere productive. The key here is professional deflection.
Setting a boundary without seeming rude. That is the goal. I've found that what works is a kind of pivot. You acknowledge what they said, but you don't engage with it.
So what does that sound like in practice?
You could say something neutral like, "Wow, that sounds really challenging," and then you immediately pivot. I hope that gets resolved.
Yeah.
By the way, switching gears, can we look at the project timeline?
Switching gears. I love that phrase. It's so clear and professional. It's like putting up a polite stop sign.
It is. And I had a coworker who used to do this all the time. He'd come by my desk to gossip, and it would just derail my whole morning.
So what did you do?
I started using the deadline pivot. I'd just say, "I hear you, but I'm honestly buried trying to finish this report for the deadline." I said it politely, but I said it every single time.
And did it work?
It took a few weeks, but yeah, he eventually just stopped trying. He realized my desk wasn't the place for it. The consistency was key.
That's a perfect example. Because you're not making it about him, you're making it about the work. It's an objective professional reason. But what if they're really persistent? What if they just ignore your pivot and keep going?
That's when you have to get a little firmer, but still keep the politeness. You might have to pivot to a direct question about their work.
So you turn it back on them?
Kind of. You could say, I understand, but given how tight the client deadline is, do you think we should focus on finalizing those numbers first? Can you send me your update on that? You're using the work itself as the reason to stop the conversation.
That's really smart. It forces them to either engage with their professional duties or admit they're just trying to waste time.
Yeah.
But what about the social side of things? If you're always shutting these conversations down, do you risk looking like you're not a team player?
That is a real risk, and you have to balance it. That's why that first little bit of acknowledgement, that sounds challenging part, is so important. It shows you're not a robot.
Right, you show empathy first.
Exactly. And then in all other situations, in meetings, on project work, you have to be extra collaborative and positive. You celebrate team wins, you offer to help people, you make sure they know your boundaries about negativity, not about them as people.
So you isolate the unproductive behavior, but you double down on productive collaboration.
You got it. Okay, but let's talk about the hardest version of this. What if you need to be really explicit and say, I'm not talking about this? How do you say that professionally?
That's the toughest one. The key is to make it about your own feelings or focus, not about judging them. You use I statements.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. You could say, I prefer to keep my focus just on the project tasks right now, so I'm not really comfortable getting into that.
I'm not comfortable. That's really powerful.
It is, because it's impossible to argue with. No one can tell you how you should feel. You're stating a personal boundary in a completely professional way. They can't really push back on that without looking extremely unprofessional themselves.
That's a fantastic tool to have in your back pocket. Okay, let's move on to another classic difficult colleague, the credit taker.
Ah, yes. The one who takes your idea and presents it as their own, or maybe pushes their work onto your plate.
This one is so frustrating. And with this person, just talking isn't enough. You have to move into documentation.
Absolutely. This is where professional English becomes a tool for self-protection. The rule is simple. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen.
I think a lot of people feel awkward about that, though. They feel like sending a follow-up email, summarizing who's doing what sounds like they're, bragging or being overly formal.
I get that, but you have to push past that feeling. When you're dealing with a credit taker, it's not about being awkward. It's about creating a factual record. After any meeting, you send a quick, polite summary email.
And the language in that email has to be really specific, right?
Super specific. You don't say, we discussed the project. You say, just to confirm my action items from the meeting, I will be finalizing the Q3 data analysis and drafting the key recommendations based on my findings. You use strong, clear ownership verbs.
I learned this lesson the hard way once. It was painful.
Oh no, what happened?
I had this idea for a new reporting system. I was really excited about it, and I explained the whole thing in a brainstorming session with a team lead.
Okay.
He loved it, but I was so caught up in the excitement that I never sent a follow-up email. I never put my name on it in writing.
Let me guess. He presented it as his own.
2 weeks later, in a big meeting with management, he presented my entire framework as his idea, and I had nothing, no proof. I felt so foolish and honestly really angry. It was a brutal lesson.
Wow, that's awful, but it's such a powerful story. It shows that documentation isn't about being distrustful. It's about being professional and protecting your contributions. So, thinking about that, is documentation always the first step? Or should you try talking to the person one-on-one first?
That's a great question. I think it depends. If it's a one-time thing, maybe a misunderstanding, then a quick, polite conversation is probably best. Hey, I thought I was handling X. Can we just clarify the roles here?
Right. Give them the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly. But if you see a pattern of behavior, then you have to document everything. And even if you have that conversation, you send an email right after saying, great chat, just to confirm our agreement.
Always get it in writing. Okay, what about the most high-pressure situation? You're in a meeting, maybe even a presentation, and a colleague claims your work right there in front of everyone. What do? You can't just yell, that was my idea.
No, you definitely can't do that. You have to stay incredibly calm. The trick is to correct the record politely, often by framing it as a collaboration.
So you kind of add to their point.
Yes, you could wait for a pause and say something like, "That's an excellent point." And just to build on that, when my team and I were analyzing that data last week, we found you're not accusing them directly, you're just calmly reinserting yourself into the narrative as a contributor.
That's so smooth. You're correcting them without creating a huge conflict. I love that. So what specific phrases are good for making your ownership clear without sounding, arrogant?
I think referencing previous documents is the most professional way. You can say things like, "As I outlined in the summary email from Tuesday," or "based on the framework I developed for this project."
Ah, so you're pointing back to your paper trail.
Exactly. You're not saying, "I'm right." You're saying, "The record shows this." It's factual, it's objective, and it's almost impossible to argue with. It's not defensive, it's just due diligence.
That's a really powerful mindset shift. Okay, let's tackle our third type of colleague,
Yeah.
the one who's overly critical.
The one whose feedback is always harsh, maybe a little personal, and just not constructive.
Yeah. And that can feel like a direct attack, especially
Yeah.
when you're working in a second language and feel like you can't defend yourself properly.
For sure. The key here, I think, is to immediately take the emotion out of it. You have to force them to be objective
How do you do that?
by asking for data and specifics. If they say something vague and harsh, like, "This whole idea is just weak," your job is to drill down.
So you don't get defensive.
You absolutely can't. You have to keep your voice calm and ask a probing question. I learned this from working with a reviewer who was just relentlessly negative.
What did you do?
I started asking things like, "I appreciate the feedback. To make sure I understand, could you point to the specific metrics in Section 3 that you feel are not supported by the data?"
Wow. That's a master move.
It works because if their criticism is just a vague feeling of dislike, they can't answer a question that specific. They're forced to either find real evidence, which makes their feedback useful, or back down.
You're forcing them to elevate their own critique to a professional standard. I love that.
Another great one is to ask for a solution. "Okay, I understand your concern. To clarify, what alternative approach would you suggest for this section, keeping our budget in mind?" It makes them part of the solution, not just a critic.
That's brilliant. It shifts the burden from you to them. But what if the feedback is just clearly unfair or even insulting? What can you say in the moment to de-escalate?
In that case, you need to buy yourself time. You need a phrase that stops the conversation without escalating the conflict.
A professional pause button.
Exactly. You could say, "Thank you for that perspective. That's a strong comment, and I'd like to take some time to process it properly. I'll circle back with a response tomorrow."
Circle back. And another great professional phrase. You're not agreeing, you're not arguing, you're just tabling the discussion.
Right. It gives you time to calm down and formulate a clear, written response where you're in total control of the tone. But what about that physical feeling? In a meeting, when you're suddenly criticized, your heart starts pounding. How do you stay calm on the outside?
That's the hardest part. The physical reaction is automatic. The key is to have a pre-planned question ready to go, a default response.
So while your brain is catching up, your mouth already knows what to say.
Precisely. The moment you feel that rush of adrenaline, you take a breath and ask a process question. Like, could you elaborate on what you see as the root cause of that issue? Asking a question immediately puts the focus back on them and buys you those critical seconds to get your composure back.
I've also found that just rephrasing their criticism can help. If they say, "Your plan is totally impractical," you can respond calmly. "So to make sure I understand, your main concern is with the practical implementation of the plan."
Yes. Neutral rephrasing. You strip out the emotional words like totally impractical and just state the core issue. It shows you're listening objectively, not defensively.
It brings the whole temperature of the room down. So as we wrap up these strategies, what's the big takeaway here?
I think the main goal is to always maintain professional distance. Your job isn't to change your colleague's personality, it's to manage the interaction so you can get your work done effectively and protect your own professional reputation.
It's transactional, not personal. By using this kind of structured, professional English, you're building a wall around the interaction, keeping the emotion out and focusing only on the outcome.
And consistency is everything. You have to use these strategies every single time. If you do it sometimes but let it slide other times, it sends a mixed message and the behavior won't change.
That's so true. Your predictability is your strength. Okay, Before we finish up, I have one quick tip about using softening language, even when you have to be really firm.
Oh, this is a good one. What have you got?
It's just about adding small phrases that acknowledge the other person. So instead of, you need to do this, you could say, in my opinion, it would be best if we, or perhaps we could consider doing this first. It just makes the firm message a little easier to hear.
That's a great tip. It preserves the relationship. And I'll add one for email. Always end a difficult email chain on a forward-looking action item.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so after you've corrected something or set a boundary, you end with something positive, like, looking forward to seeing the project move to the next stage, or I'll update the plan with these changes. It closes the door on the conflict and opens the door to productivity.
Always be moving forward. That's a perfect way to think about it. Well, this has been so incredibly useful. I really hope that these strategies and examples help all of you out there feel more confident and prepared for those tricky workplace conversations.
Absolutely. And we really want to hear from you. Please go down in the comments and share your own stories or strategies. What phrases have worked for you when dealing with a difficult colleague? Let's all learn from each other. And a huge thank you to everyone for listening and spending your time with us today.
Remember, building confidence in these situations really just comes from practice. The more you listen to and use this kind of professional English, the more natural it will feel when you actually need it.
For sure. And we'll be back soon with more conversations to help you build your professional skills.
As always, if you found this useful for your career, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it. Your support really does mean the world to us. Goodbye to all of our wonderful listeners.
Goodbye, everyone. Stay professional and calm out there.
Goodbye. This was a really great chat today.
It was a pleasure. Talk to you soon.